All of that being said, I am super excited and very grateful to be able to invite the following people up to the stage to tell me that I got everything wrong and everything's going to be fine. So, very excited to welcome. He's been on the show several times before. He's a political scientist from Mount Royal University. He tolerates my antics with an incredible generosity, especially when I did the bit about the announcement of the council, and then Daniel Smith was being asked about the whole crep care scandal, and I wheeled off the side. I got a very disappointed, really. Very excited to welcome Dr. Duane Bratt to the stage. You're stuck closest to me, sir. I know, right?
By the way, it's 1-1 in the 7th.
Yeah, but here's my thing, and we talked about this before we started the show. It's only the second game, so it doesn't matter. Until you get to game 3 or 4, I don't sports, so I'm not great at this stuff. But until you get to game 3 or 4, the stakes are just well, they showed up, so. There's that disappointed look I was going for. Lorian Hardcastle is an associate professor of law. She's also been on the show many times before, and she also tolerates all of these people just put up with me, and I don't fully know why. Very excited. Health law is the specialty. And there are no small children in the wings tonight, I am told. That's a very niche joke, I apologize. Stephani Clements is a teacher. She is president of the ATA Local 38, but I'm going to throw it in right here. She's not speaking for the ATA tonight, so don't get mad at her. She's also the reason why I have this pin. You probably can't see it. It says allegedly. And I am so excited to welcome to the stage Cecelia Fraser. There are certain moments. Doing the show for 6 years now, 7 years almost, there have been certain moments that have just been absolute gifts that have completely changed the way that I view things. And a few years ago, Cecelia and the organization that she works with, you don't get paid.
No, we don't get paid. No, we actually spend our own money to do the work we're doing.
Exactly. There's an organization called Street Cats YYC, and they are, okay. If you're unfamiliar with their work, they're a harm reduction outreach group that does a lot of different work, but the experience that I got to have was walking through the downtown core with them on one of their walk. It was so cold. It was so cold. And I want to talk about this for a quick sec before we get to the panel discussion, because it's so important and it is in such stark contrast to the path that the province is choosing. Watching the way that the Street Cats build relationships with the people that they're trying to reach was so powerful. It completely changed how I approach dealing with, I totally will. The homeless population, people who are dealing with substance use. It totally changed my practice as a paramedic in so many different ways, and it was a wake-up call in a lot of different ways because I realized how much I was doing wrong. And it was just an amazing, amazing experience. The story that I want to share about the Street Cats was at one point in the evening, there was a woman who ran up and y'all knew her, and she just was like, "Hey, I just wanted to come say hi." And she had been somebody that the Street Cats have been working with for quite some time. She had gotten into housing. She was, I don't know how many days sober, but she was. And she came down to that section that we were in because she wanted to still be part of that community. She still wanted to have that community and have those relationships. And that to me that's it. I think about my conversations with Guy Felicella, and it is that building of relationships and that building of community. That's the thing that saves people's lives, not forcing them into treatment. That's just my thoughts. I'm going to ask for yours in a minute. But thank you all so much for being willing to take the time and apparently give up a basketball game or something. Dr. Bratt, and we're going to go down the way. How'd I do on my history of notwithstanding stuffs?
So there was stuff that was missed,
Cool.
stuff that was misapplied, and I'll begin with Peter Lougheed. The idea of Section 33 actually came from Sterling Lyon, the Premier of Manitoba. Then it was articulated by Alan Blakeney, but because Lougheed was the smartest of the bunch, he gets more of the credit than the other three. But Alan Blakeney, NDP Premier of Saskatchewan, was worried about the court striking down expansion of social programs in Saskatchewan. That's why he supported the notwithstanding clause. The other is the history of Canadian politics, British politics, is parliamentary supremacy. Therefore, they wanted a dialogue between the courts and the elected officials. So when you say, well, judges suck, do you know Clarence Thomas in the United States at all? Like, there's a reason for this. The other, and this is key, it's a 5-year suspension. And the reason it's 5 years is because there'll be an election in between. They can't touch voting rights. That is exempt from the notwithstanding clause. So if the people believe that the government misused this, they can toss the bums out. And then finally, and this is probably the biggest one, is there was no reference in your monologue to Section 1. And so Section 1 says, no, I was about to say notwithstanding, I don't think it's in there, but in a free and democratic society, sometimes rights need to be violated. And we violate legal rights when we do check stops, right? We did all sorts of restrictions on during COVID. Those were all justifiable under Section 1. The benefit of the Canadian Charter is we had the experience of the U.S. Bill of Rights. The U.S. Bill of Rights, the judges have kind of sometimes interpreted the equivalent of Section 1, but in the absence of Section 1, there's a lot of loopholes. So Section 1 is really important. So when you use Section 33, what you're saying is, we know we're violating charter rights, and it's not justifiable in a free and democratic society. That is very different. And I'll get even more so, the idea of preemptive use of Section 33, which is what we're hearing out of this provincial government, is to say, we know that what we're doing can't be saved under Section 1. And we know that in advance before the courts even rule on that. And we're going to do it anyway. The other is the Lougheed piece. It's, calling for an amendment to the Constitution.
That's easy, right?
That's really easy. But he's writing in the context of the most notorious example of the use of Section 33. Right? So it comes in 1982. The Quebec government, who is upset that they did not sign the Constitution, which is a whole other kettle of fish, even though it applied to them, used the notwithstanding clause on every piece of provincial legislation until the PQ was defeated in 1985. Then things calmed down, and we have Meech Lake, which was going to bring Quebec into the Constitution with honor, and Robert Bourassa, the Liberal, the Federalist leader, uses the notwithstanding clause over the Quebec Sign Law. It helped to destroy the Meech Lake Accord, which then put us in a whole series of constitutional crises throughout the 1990s. Lougheed is writing in the aftermath of that. And so what he is suggesting, don't use it preemptively, have a supermajority in your legislature, all good ideas. None of it is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I will also say the Canadian government has never used it, and the Alberta government has threatened. There's been lots of people in the supporters of the government that wanted to use it. They refused to. Probably the closest we came was over the Vreen decision, which was an individual who was fired for being gay, working at a Catholic university. Ralph Klein said he was going to, and then backed away. And one of the reasons he backed away, and this is absolutely critical, because it's the connections between gay rights and trans rights, I think, are a continuum, is at that time, this is pre-email, but they had a hotline. It was a hotline where you could call up and give your opinion to the premier. And Ralph Klein goes into his office and he listens to the calls. And they were all congratulating him in such vitriolic, homophobic language that it just cut him to the core, and the next morning said, we're not doing that. And I can tell you, it's one thing to listen to his speech in the legislature, it's another to watch the video, because the minister next to him, the Treasury Minister at the time, was absolutely appalled. Had that person been the premier instead of Ralph Klein, we'd have used the notwithstanding clause at that point. And that person standing next to him was Stockwell Day. So there's a lot more to say, but I will finish with this. You began with a clip, and that's when I hung my head, where Daniel Smith was going on about disallowance and the ability of disallowance, because damn it, why can't Alberta have its own currency? Okay, that was used over Bill Aberhart. And there was a number of court cases that tossed out what Aberhart wanted to do around press freedom, the whole 9 yards, and disallowance. That was 90 years ago. It has not been used since. My belief is it probably, and I'm sitting next to a law professor, so she can correct me on this, any federal government who was to use that now, constitutionally, they would say, sorry, it hasn't been used, you have lost that power. But we may be going into a period of time, based on all the things that you talked about, that are going to resemble Bible Bill Aberhart in the 1930s, and I don't mean that as a compliment.
No, I appreciate it, and that's one of the parallels that I withheld making, because if you want to know about like a really, really horrible time in Alberta's history, go ahead and read about Bible Bill and the Socreds, because it's nightmare fuel for weeks. Dr. Hardcastle.
I'll pass it.
Yeah.
So here's one of the things that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because I think that there's a bit of a false equivalency that the government is playing. And I find it wild on so many levels that a government, especially premier, that rode into power on the whole like, bodily autonomy is the most important thing ever, as long as it's just mine we're talking about. It seems to me like Dr. Bratt talked about the Section 1. That's the Oakes test, if I'm right? Okay. That is for, it was used in the pandemic during an external, temporary, exigent threat. That seems to me radically different than utilizing it for policy, because there are really only 2, maybe 3 conceivable outcomes that I can see. One of them is they roll the notwithstanding clause on any of the things that we talked about here, and they get their 5 years. We're talking about policy issues. So I feel safe to say trans people are not going away in 5 years, nor should they. So this conversation is either going to come up again, we're either going to see the notwithstanding clause be re-invoked, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is there like a cooling off period? Because I don't think there is. That seems to be radically different than the Section 1 piece, because Section 1 says, if it's justifiable, like, shit, sometimes COVID's a thing, and we got to do what's best for everybody. This is, well, there's those 8 kids who got top surgery, oh my God.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Duane on this, is that, yeah, Section 1 is vastly different than the notwithstanding clause. And so Section 1 does allow for certain limitations on individual rights, but what it demands of the government is to make the case. You know, it calls on them to produce the evidence to show that what it's doing is the least impairing way of addressing the issue, and there is this dialogue. The court can come back with concerns about certain parts of what the government is doing. You know, in their decision, they'll explain other parts that maybe are less problematic. Sometimes they even sort of nudge the government towards wording that might be more constitutionally permissible. And so it is this dialogue, and what you know, in a sort of an ideal world end up with is, you know, government policy meeting up with sort of the wisdom of the courts on individual rights. And if we skip to the notwithstanding clause, like, we lose all of that. Mm-hmm. And so some of what, for example, is in the compassionate intervention legislation is also in the Mental Health Act. And several years ago, maybe 2019-ish, there was a constitutional challenge to the application of Alberta's Mental Health Act on an individual, and the court in that case was concerned both about the treatment of the individual, but the legislation itself. And so the government of the day amended the mental health legislation to address some of the court's concerns. Now, are there still concerns with that legislation? Yeah, of course, but you had this dialogue. They demanded of the government to produce the evidence to show, why are you doing this way? Why are you doing it that way? You know, here's what we're concerned about. Here's what the legislation is missing. Here's where you could have more procedural protections. And that then the government was able to take that into account in making amendments. Here, there's none of that. There's none of, we're calling you to account for your choices and to demonstrate why they're necessary. There's no wisdom of the courts to maybe help you make some changes that are more protective of individual rights. It's just like, to heck with all of that. We like our first draft. We're going with this. And so that's really the problem with the notwithstanding clause, is you lose the benefit of having a judiciary that weighs in on individual rights and has that back and forth with government about them.
What is your, so when you were talking about the Mental Health Act, we're talking about forms. This seems to me to be okay, so you said that we shouldn't go in this direction. Start the car, because we're going to go in this direction as far as we can get. Am I reading that wrong?
No, if they use the notwithstanding clause and don't let it go through the courts, it is basically like start the car. Whereas if it went to the courts, you know, this sort of nonsense of, if you've read the government's policy paper on why it's adopted compassionate intervention, they have a couple sort of strange examples from other jurisdictions that they don't really explain and sort of cherry pick. And it's like, here's 2 pages about why we think it's okay to, you know, significantly infringe on individual rights and the rights of those who are quite vulnerable and may not be in much of a position to challenge this legislation. And so, you know, you have this kind of 2-page policy thing, and that wouldn't be enough for the courts. If they had to take it to the courts and they had to justify it under Section 1, that cross-jurisdictional evidence, such that it is, you know, it would get pushed back on, and they would have to really actually look at what other jurisdictions are doing, and there would, you know, be pushback from the lawyers on the other side. So yeah, we're missing all of that in favor of this kind of start the car. We're just doing this, and the concern is that maybe years before this legislation is challenged, because the kinds of people that this legislation is likely to apply to aren't necessarily those who are well positioned to mount a legal challenge. I mean, it's telling that we had the Mental Health Act for decades and decades and decades before someone who should not have been hospitalized for as long as he was, and in the absence of some very obvious procedural protections, you know, you just sort of had a lawyer who kind of took that case on, but years and years and years and years of that legislation before that happened. And so I think we may see the same thing here, is these kind of pieces of legislation that are so intrusive on individual rights hang around for ages and ages and ages, even past that kind of five-year mark, if they, then proceed with another round, another 5 years, and notwithstanding. It may be a long time before any of this gets to the courts, but.
And I think it's, I'm going to try to do some case law. I'm going to fail miserably. But, there is no shortage of examples where governments have said, we're going to do a thing because we really like to do this thing. And in the absence of evidence or wisdom of the courts or advice, they have been demonstrated to be wrong. In 2002, the provincial government made an order that the labor code, I'm reading because I can't do this on my own, the labor code declaring it was an emergency, but it was found to be outside of their jurisdiction and set aside. And the government went and appealed that. And in 2015, the Supreme Court confirmed the right to strike is protected under the Charter in a 5-2 vote. I looked it up and everything. And struck down the Saskatchewan legislation that made those workers essential. You can probably guess what my next question is. If we already know from the Supreme Court, not but 10 years ago, that the right to strike is protected under the Charter, I hear there's going to be some legislation tabled on Monday. If that legislation is tabled, it would be a violation of the Charter, and the only way to enforce it would be to go with the notwithstanding clause. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I think, you'd have to see, of course, what's actually in the legislation that's coming.
From a conceptual.
But conceptually, I have concerns with the constitutionality of what I think is going to show up in the Legislative Assembly on Monday.
Hey, Stephanie.
Hi.
So we've talked many times, and the problems that exist in classrooms are very real. It baffles me that there are some folks that would maybe write opinion pieces saying, "Oh, classroom sizes don't matter. I went to school with Demetrius, no bias."
I taught him.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Which one?
Demetrius Nicolatis.
Oh, you're probably so limited in what. There's a rabbit hole that I desperately want to go down. But the evidence, ask any teacher, hey, does having a class of 15 kids feel any different than having a class of, 60? Does that change how your day goes? I feel like most teachers would say, yes, it in fact does change how your day goes. We're at a fascinating point in time right now because with this teacher's contract, it seems like up till now, teachers have, and the ATA, have taken the position of, okay, enough's enough. The classrooms are on fire. We need to put them out. That's very, very important. I don't know what that song was. But that stance can only seem to be enforced in any way via strike. And teachers have now been on strike for, I think it's 3 weeks. My kids love it. There must be a certain degree of despondency that exists within the teaching community, I can only imagine, because if the only lever that is available to address these issues is saying please or striking, saying please hasn't worked. And it appears as a reasonable possibility that striking is about to be removed and there may be some consequences for the union folks. What are you hearing? What are you feeling as a teacher yourself?
So the last 3 weeks have been the hardest weeks of my life. And I know so many of the other teachers that are here and those that will watch this later, this has been, I mean, this is the hardest thing we've ever had to decide to do. People are not being paid for any of these days. And the idea that the government is going to come in and railroad through by using things that shouldn't be used for things like the freedom to assemble, like freedom of assembly, and then by rights, my union or my association, and to take that away, and our teachers are now, and we don't know, just like you say, we have to see what that legislation says on Monday, but the idea that we're just gonna be told, no, you're going back to work and nothing's changing, and you're not, you've made zero difference at a great cost, is devastating to teachers. And we know that, so Janet Brown does some research for the ATA, specific questions, and that information was shared with us, and we were given permission to share it out wider. And 78% of the people polled are like, we're with you. We got you, we're backing you on the strike. Class sizes are too big, you're not paid enough, you're striking, we support the strike. And the outpouring of just support from the community and has been overwhelming. And to hear that, someone can just technically, make up a rule and on Monday say, oh, too bad, sorry, you're going back. And I think even the point of, so I was at the throne speech on Thursday, which was horrible. It was like listening
I
to
felt
that.
so bad for her. So a lot of people don't know this about the throne speech. The lieutenant governor doesn't write it. The government writes it and says, you'll read this. And she has to. And
I will say she was wearing a lovely shade of red. But in listening to that and just listening to the words and like with complete lack of emotion, like I would have quit my job and like, well, I'm close to retirement, I'm done. But that was really hard, and to know that yes, you're going to put something through, and we knew that there were some levers. You could say that there was a undue harm to children because they've been out for 3 weeks and they can't write a stupid test or something. Tell me how I really feel. But to also put forward the motions, 3, 4, whatever they are, not the bills, but the motions that say, and we're gonna ram this through, and we're gonna do it in a day, and we're not gonna let anyone debate it, and no one sees the legislation until 4 minutes before they present it on the floor, and then they put it live on the internet, and then they give everyone the paper. And so, the opposition is going to be reading it for the first time and then have to debate it for a very limited time. It's just like, it's gross. I don't know a better word, that this is a miss. I just wanted to throw things, but they don't let you do that from the gallery.
But this goes again to like, I am certain, I can see the fingers warming up over the keyboards already, being like, oh, Stephanie's just an NDP shill. But I think it's really important to highlight that what we're talking about when we talk about the opposition not having time to read the bill and prepare for it, it seems to me that is disallowing the opposition to do their job, because their function in the legislature, to my understanding, is supposed to be, hey, you've done this thing, we maybe have some questions. And to not allow the time for that process to unfold seems to me a subversion of not just what the legislative processes are supposed to be, but I see it as a real subversion of democracy, because these are the levers, these are the paths that the system is supposed to take in order to produce the best results for Albertans. And what this government is effectively saying with this ramming through the legislation is, yeah, we don't care.
Absolutely. A first reading implies that you get it, you read it, and then you take it away and you think about it and you come back.
I want smart people to look. When I did the little thing about 2015, I have a lawyer friend that I was like, am I going to screw this up? And you have to have that second oversight, at least. That's the whole point of the additional readings. One of the things that I'm curious about from you as well is the last time that you and I had a conversation on the show, we talked about moral injury. And we talked about the moral injury that exists for teachers who are unable to provide what they know they should be providing for students. And I can't imagine for any teacher that this was an easy choice of, hey, you know what, we'll get 3 weeks off. I'm not getting paid for any of it, but it's cool. I don't imagine that there are any teachers who jumped for that. And what I've seen on social media is there's a lot of teachers who are desperately missing their kids. I went to my school, one of my kids' schools, to vote, and they've already got the big, giant welcome back on the wall because they desperately want to see their kids come back. How much moral injury are you hearing about from teachers through this process? And you have to see where I'm going.
Tons. That moral distress. I guess if you say, let's say you're a doctor and you've got 26 people in front of you, but you only have 15 minutes, and you have to check with every of those people, and you're like, oh well, sorry, you're gonna have to just go home sick because I can't physically get to you. I don't have time left in the day. I mean, can you imagine how that feels to say, I know you're vomiting, but you'll be fine. I can't help you. My time's up. Like, that's what our teachers are dealing with in the classrooms when they have, 45 students I have a friend who has a high school psychology class, and there physically aren't enough tables or chairs left in the building to actually sit them. And so kids are like, hey, I'll give you my really good snack if I can sit today. And you could maybe have it tomorrow. So like fighting over the chairs in the room to focus. And so of course the teacher has to do the work and has to get the lessons across. But how do you check in with those kids? What we're seeing, that moral distress of teachers equals burnout. And so even before this, we're seeing higher numbers of teachers who are using sick leave or being written off because they just can't do it. Like it's overwhelming, and when you do that day after day, it's like a trauma. And I'm worried that, hey, we're back on whatever, let's say Wednesday's the earliest day we can be back. And you'd think that they would say, hey, maybe you could have a day, and I have no idea, but, hey, everyone's going back. Well, teachers have been without their computers, they've been without their accounts, they don't have access, and, maybe having a day to, like, get their computer started up again and do all of those updates that are sitting on them, because they've been a brick for 3 weeks, and then to, like, figure out what am I doing tomorrow, what's my schedule, who do I have, but I'm like, nope. Godspeed, you get the children. And so it's like, I feel for, like, I just really worry if we're gonna see a rise in that people just leaving or quitting, or it's not good.
And this comes on the heels, and this is where I'm gonna go next. This comes on the heels of teachers being told, you have to notify kids you have to notify parents if kids want to use a different name in school, a different pronoun at school, and also they're not allowed to do the sports. I can only imagine how cumulative all of that is.
And all of those things, plus with little warning, and another bunch of curriculum being dropped on us in May, and you have to do this, and we're piloting that, and we're doing this, and you've got all these assessments that we know because my friend George made them, and we're getting all this data. I'm not lying on that. And then we knew there was labor action coming. We didn't know when, so we started the school year wondering if we were going to start the school year. And so you already have, so Calgary Public Schools, we have about 10,000 teachers, and they're all gearing up for this, and then it's just like one hit after another after another. I've heard so many people say, I'm going to leave this province. And so I would not be surprised if we get the worst of what we could get on Monday, that you're going to see the response that there's even less teachers. And the Calgary Board of Education hires anyone with a heartbeat and a certification. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way, but teachers, like, if you're a teacher and you get hired, poor Rocky View, my friends, some of the other local presidents are here, and we like steal your people all the time. We're like, oh, you want to work for us? We'll hire. And I use the universal we because we don't have enough. We don't have enough substitute teachers. So then you don't have someone, you're sick, you can't be there, you have a professional development day, and you can't get a sub. Well, who covers that empty class? The rest of the teachers in the school. So who doesn't get a break? The rest of the teachers in the school. And it's by I think mid-April is the worst time, because I think we had 200 unfilled positions, so that means 200 classes without a teacher to physically care for them. So, I mean, it compiles on each other. So teachers aren't in a good space, and it's not looking brighter at any point.
I mean, I imagine there's probably some school boards in Manitoba that are super stoked, but Cecelia, what do you want to take a swing at? I mean, here's the obvious one is the forced treatment. Yeah. Because, again, and I'm not saying this to be, I don't know, dramatic or whatever.
Don't worry, what I have to say about that will sound far more dramatic than anything you're
Excellent, perfect. but like it's the work that the Street Cats do and that I got to see, which was a tremendous privilege, and I really can't overstate that. That has caused me to have conversations with my coworkers, being like, "Yeah, don't do that. That's actually. It turns out that's a dick move."
Thank you for telling.
Of course. Once you know something's wrong, but I think of my conversations with my friend Guy, and again, it's that aggressive silencing of voices that are arguing for compassion. I do not think that I would be hyperbolic to say, with the recent little dust up that we had in Breakdown Land, with the removal of Guy's column from the Calgary Herald, which is some dystopian level shit in my opinion. That is the silencing of voices that are arguing for compassion. And I don't think that it's hyperbolic to say that Marshall Smith's column, the arguments that he was advancing was for less compassion. And what I saw when you guys were doing your work was, it turns out compassion's probably the thing that's going to make the biggest difference for the most amount of people. Be dramatic.
It's not ineptitude. It's not simple politicking to appeal to the worst aspects of the party's base of voters. Danielle Smith and Marshall Smith and all of these people's friends that are advancing these ideas want people to die. That is what they want. That is the goal.
Why do you, I'm not challenging you.
Because they know. They know, the evidence shows, you were talking about it in your monologue, I think the actual number is you're 7 times more likely to die of a drug overdose in the first 90 days you get out of prison or a forced treatment center, because it doesn't, and these forced treatment centers, they're just the one, I think the one in Calgary and Edmonton, they're just renovating wings of the remand centers. So they're literally just locking drug users in cages so that they can go back out on the street in 90 days and die, because then they're not the government's problem anymore.
I wish I could find a way to articulate disagreeing with you, but I can't. Because the math, and I'm gonna come to you next, Dr. Bratt. The math, I don't disagree with your interpretation of the math, which is a very difficult thing to say, because to me, there are only 2 explanations for what we're seeing here. One of them is yours, which is they just want to kill people, or at least have people die so they're no longer a problem. The other explanation that I can see, if I extend the most generosity that I can, is they're just so arrogant that they don't believe the evidence. They're just so arrogant that they don't believe the data and they don't believe the facts.
I don't think you can they are arrogant, yes. But I don't think you could be that stupid or that arrogant. I don't think it's, there's overwhelming evidence from around the globe for decades.
Yeah,
you just have to think that, anybody that wants to show compassion to a drug user must, there must be something wrong in my brain. So anything that I come up with, and anything I present as evidence must be wrong because I'm fundamentally flawed because I care about these like monsters of humans.
I would make the cautious argument that we shouldn't underestimate the capacity for stupidity. And I say this with chemtrails and ivermectin and let's just cook the meat better for the homeless people in mind. So this is where, again, I think that part of the problem that we have to acknowledge is because of how degraded we have allowed our body politic to get, there's a bit of an idiocracy.
Yeah.
And if you can speak well and you can make people feel like they've been listened to even when you're not, you will get people to vote for you. And I always go back to, I talk about Daniel Smith's communication strengths, and I go back to the chemtrails nonsense, because instead of saying, hey, you should get off Facebook, or some variation of that, she validated the concern. I don't think, God, I hope, that Danielle Smith believes in chemtrails.
I mean, I think if somebody had a conversation with her for like an afternoon, they could convince her. She seems very easy to convince to believe things.
An
And she's
ideological
willing to
magpie, I
She's
think. is what
willing
she
to
is.
listen to anyone. She's like a lady Joe Rogan of Alberta. I'll listen to any opinion. Like,
Does that mean we're gonna have to worry about Joe Rogan becoming president? Because, like,
maybe.
Dr. Bratt.
I have lots of issues with the force treatment on a number of different levels. But I do not believe that the motivation is to kill people. I have actually been struck by how much effort this government has put, how much resources this government has put into addictions that other governments haven't. And I suspect it's because the opiate crisis is hitting the party. It's hitting their donors. It's hitting their MLAs. It's hitting what they would call normal Albertans as opposed to street people, Indigenous people, people who may not deserve that same sort of care. Now, what they're doing is wrong in a fundamentally different way, but I don't think their motivations are wrong. And so I think we need to separate that from the actual policy. And there's lots of aspects of the addictions policy that is good, except for the forced treatment. There's some others as well. I don't want to get sued by Marshall Smith that I could bring in, but there are aspects of that. But I do think that this is occurring in other jurisdictions as well. We're seeing the Sass Party doing some of the same stuff in Saskatchewan, minus the forced treatment. Let's see if this is the world-renowned Alberta model, as it was described in the throne speech. Let's see if other jurisdictions take it on. So I think it's flawed, it's deeply flawed, it is unconstitutional, and in many cases it won't work. And I'm not speaking as an academic, I'm speaking as someone with experience here. Not personal experience, but I have a daughter who is in addictions counseling now. As an addictions counselor, she works at the drop-in center, but the reason she does is she was an addict. And the amount of times that she went through the process and couldn't finish it, I don't have enough tears to cry over that. And one of the things that they're missing is the lack of beds. The amount of times we showed up to the Renfrew Center to put her through detox and there was no beds available, and they triaged and go, well, you have 2 parents, we'll send you home. So I do like the fact the amount of rhetoric, the amount they've created an entire ministry, the amount of money that they put in, those are all positive. But there's a bunch of other crap that they need to fix.
Yeah, I guess I don't disagree with your perspective either. The thing that I struggle on, and I think that a lot of people struggle with, is there are demonstrated outcomes of these things. And I view the Alberta model with some cynicism. And I view it with some cynicism because it was put together. The architect, as credited in the Globe and Mail, I'm going to have to point to the pen for that one. The architect of the Alberta model is somebody who was a political staffer, who was a prison guard, who had a very short dalliance with addiction, who has no clinical training. And this is what he's produced. And I feel like I would be fairly safe to say, although I know somewhere my lawyer's ears are burning, there are some people who have made a lot of money. And so
That's why I'm not going down that road. I'm just leaving that out there. But what I would also say is there are parents and there are family members at wit's end, and they're looking for any solution. And this is, I think, a simple solution that all they need to do is drag them off the street and incarcerate them for a brief period of time. Once they're out, they'll be fine. I don't think that's going to work, but I can understand the motivation in the hopes that it does. And I think that's where this is coming from.
is it the responsibility of the government who is going to implement these policies to educate those people as to the reality of the disease that their loved ones are dealing with?
Or they believe that the previous patterns of safe consumption sites were simply enabling behavior. I think there's a reasonable discussion here. I think they're on the wrong side of it, but I think there is a legitimate debate to take forward.
Okay. Dr. Hardcastle.
Yeah, lots of thoughts on
Nuance.
this one. I mean, I think a couple things. I think we've heard that this period when you immediately come out is this most deadly period, and I think they've really set people up for failure there, because there aren't great supports always available in the community once you come out, which is what you need, of course, to make it work. With respect to this issue that you two in your legal concerns don't want to get into, I think instead of saying what is happening here, I think we can say, well, what's happened in the U.S. with the for-profit delivery of addiction services, and it's been a disaster. And if we look at the for-profit delivery of like prison services in the U.S., addiction services, much of healthcare services, you get this issue where this profit motive leads you to cut corners in the quality of services that you're delivering. So I am concerned about who will be delivering services here, what that will look like, and what corners might be cut in terms of staffing to maximize profits. And we can look at other examples. We can look, for example, at COVID in for-profit long-term care centers versus not, and like we have data on how that played out. So we have good reason to be concerned about who's going to be delivering some of these services, and what their motives will be, and what corners might be cut, what resources will be available to people once they leave this period. I think another concern I have with the government's policy is this kind of singular focus on recovery as opposed to meeting people where they are. And you'll hear the government talk about these kind of cherry-picked, well, there are a few other places in the world that have some form of compassionate intervention. Well, they also, though, aren't rejecting some of these harm reduction approaches in favor of a recovery model. They're doing more to meet people where they are. There's better integration in some of those places of health services with social services, and so you can't just pick the one piece of their policies. So I think we have a lot of reasons to be concerned about how all of this will play out. And then I think a bigger concern with the way they've approached this, the way they've approached the health system restructuring, the way they've approached the issue with trans children is just a rejection of evidence in favor of ideology. And so, obviously we're university professor, work at universities, I know the people in Alberta who are the experts on these, these various topics. hilariously, none of us ever get calls. Like, none of it. And you hear health professionals say the same way. Like health professionals who, have worked an entire career at AHS, in admin at AHS, saying, like, who did they ask about this restructuring? Because it's nobody I know. And so there's this turning away from experts and holding their legislative ideas close to the vest, and then, they just release them into the world. And it's pretty evident to me that a lot of it hasn't been informed by evidence.
And this is what I think is the crux of the problem in many ways, because I totally see where Cecelia is coming from, and I align with that more than I would like to. I totally see the families that Dr. Bratt is talking about, where they are just desperate to do anything to save their loved ones. And this is where the failing of this government seems to be particularly laid bare, because in the face of those two things, one of the options, which is the one that the government is apparently considering using the notwithstanding clause to pursue, will kill people. One of them will have some parents having some heartache, but it's not going to be a direct driver of deaths. I think that what you talked about with the wraparound services and all of the stuff post-discharge, those are the areas where the real difference could be made, and the lack of beds for detox. Those are the areas where the real difference could be made. But instead of investing time and energy in those things and building the relationships, like the rollback on supports for street-level outreach groups has been horrifying. Because again, I go back to the fact, and I realize I'm saying this anecdotally, and I'm speaking only for myself and not for any organizations that I'm affiliated with. I hate that I have that committed to memory. The work that those groups have done has improved my practice as a paramedic, and it has improved others' practices as paramedics. And so that alone makes better. And to say, okay, but we don't want to have that happening anymore, we're just going to give paramedics the authority to incarcerate people, is like, I just can't even wrap my head. That is, okay, again, start the car. It's bonkers to me. Is there any, like, here's the question, other than an election, because we have to wait a while for that. Other than an election, is there any mechanism to say to a government, would you please look at the evidence? Would you please look at the facts? Would you please look at the reality? Because you are supposed to be the people that are making these decisions, not from a purely emotional place. You're supposed to be the people making these decisions for the betterment of all Albertans. Is there a law?
No, there's elections. There are theoretically legal challenges, although access to the courts is difficult, and it takes a long time to play out. Unfortunately, this is not a government that is particularly receptive to feedback, and that I mean, that may be the understatement of the evening. That, there have been governments in the history of you look at what's happened in different provinces that have been receptive to pushback from large portions of the citizens or experts, or even, God forbid, listen to something the opposition has to say. This is not that government. This is a government that pursues their policies and really isn't open to a lot of feedback. It's a lot of just sort of screaming into the void. And when they do backpedal on something at all, it's like, it's so, it's really quite limited. There are examples, they made, for example, a bunch of unilateral changes to how physician billings are done under our dear friend, Tyler Shandro. They dialed back some of those kind of quietly when it was clear that they just weren't going to work at all. But apart from marginal changes like that are at a really granular level, they're not really all that receptive. And so you're really left with elections and legal challenges. And even elections feel like banging your head against a wall, because of course there are a large number of people in this province who will vote UCP, like regardless. It doesn't matter. Someone's dog running, sure, that's better than the NDP. I'll vote for them. Like they don't care. The worst person in the entire town, UCP, but beside their name, sure, I'll vote for them. And it's really frustrating to try to get through to those people.
Do you have any hope for?
I'd replace any of the ministers with any dog, for the record. like
That's the line of the night, right there.
like any, you know.
Do you think? And I'm going to come back to Dr. Bratt in this in a minute. But the PC reboot, does that hurt him?
I don't know. You know what? I'll let you. I'll let you take that one. That's your. You know you know far more about what I do than the splitting up and the reunification and the so-called united conservatives.
Well, they're not united anymore. I think
That's why it's so-called united.
You've got two MLAs that are former UCP MLAs that are trying to form a new progressive conservative party.
Yeah.
So like. United in name only.
Well, and I think one of the problems with the unification was that they had to go pretty far right to pull in some of those people who felt alienated by what went on during COVID.
And they lost him anyways, because now we've got a U.S. Marine leading the Alberta Republicans. So
There may be another way, and that is passive, universal resistance. Stephanie, don't go back.
If I can speak to this.
I'm coming to you next anyway, so jump on in.
So I know, and that's been part of the conversation. So we know that, so there's a group of 32 various union groups. They refer to themselves as the Common Front, and they have been talking, because if this notwithstanding clause is used against the right to strike, then that is a threat to every other labor organization in the province to say, well, if they're going to do it to the teachers at 51,000 strong, why are they not going to consider doing it to us, the 10,000 people in whatever different groups there are? And so I think I'm not from the ATA. I do not speak as the ATA in this. There has been conversations, about a general strike, and there's been talk about like, well, then everyone's waiting to hear what comes out on Monday to find out what that next step is. And we've been hearing from our members, what do we do? And my line as the ATA said, I have to listen to our provincial executive council. They are our governance model, and we have to follow them. But people don't want to. Anyway, it's a big giant can of worms.
Do you think that last night, Gil McGowan, he put out a tweet basically saying, or a statement that was approved by this group saying, you know what, if you're going to go down this road of using the notwithstanding clause, and the statement hinged on the notwithstanding clause, if you go down this road of using the notwithstanding clause, we're all in. And, this is where I go to Dr. Bratt's like, it's Bible Bill days, y'all strap in because it's going to get worse. But do you think that there's an appetite amongst teachers for that, or are they tired?
Honestly, I couldn't tell. I hear on one side, people are exhausted, they're defeated, they're disappointed at what might happen, and on the other side, they're reared up and ready to go, and they're not done, and so I don't know how many on each side of that, I really can't say. But are they mad at this government who, going back to this, the stupidity or the lack of evidence? Now in the last few weeks, it's felt like it's like, no, it's a pissing match. And so, well, if you're going to strike, then we're going to tell the school boards that they're not allowed to pay for your benefits. Well, that's millions of dollars that. And a worry for so many of our members who rely on that, and then to have millions of dollars being paid for ads to tell us how it's great here. No, it's not. And this many people, that just hurts, because as a taxpayer, that's my money that you're spending. I'm paying. I know that my part of my union dues and part of my membership fees are going towards the ads that we've been putting out but we voted for that, as opposed to, I didn't vote for someone to spend tax money on advertisements that denigrate me.
Cecelia, one of the things that I love about the Street Cats ethos is that it is, from what I can see, very rooted in the punk rock.
Yeah.
And you know, Joe Strummer, there's a quote about from one of my favorite punk rockers, where he says, "This is what Joe trained us for. It's time." How do you feel about all of this?
I mean, outside of like Street Cats and that work, as a disabled person, as a trans person, as somebody who used to, still does, gray area, uses drugs, cares about people that use drugs, cares about the unhoused members of my community, my neighbors, because they are your neighbors. Just because they don't have a house does not mean they are not your neighbors. Now, all of these intersections of my identity, though, I feel completely backed into a corner in this province right now. And like all the talk of like teachers being like, well, what the hell do I do? Do I leave the province? Do I go teach in Manitoba? A lot of people in my social circles talking about leaving. You know, I gotta go to BC so I can continue to get care for my trans child, or like disability benefits, or like, hey, maybe I don't want to get locked in a cage because I don't have a house. You know, people leave, but like where I'm at, and like with the work that I do with Street Cats, is like I'm doing this to like try to make this place that has always been my home like a little bit better. Like I want to make my corner of the world better than it was when I got here, when I leave. And that's my whole goal of life. And so like I'm not going, like you say, this is what Joe trained us for, and stand up and fight. Like I can't friggin' go. Like, because who else is gonna be here? There's not people like us, who else is gonna be here?
And this is, I'm gonna do a quick round because I could always do like 5-hour things of these things. And I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, damn, it's 2 hours already. But this is one of the things that I think is really, really important. And I'm gonna say something that's probably gonna be a little bit controversial. And I've said it before. This is where I think people who do believe in compassion and who do believe in evidence and who do believe in all of these things need to acknowledge David Parker is right.
About what?
People need to show up.
Yeah.
He's very, very good at, like, I hate that I have to give David Parker
I know.
credit for anything. He's a good organizer. He's also a good public speaker. Like, when I've been counter-protesting him on the other side of the street, screaming about how, what the hell, I don't know, how I'm gonna burn in hell for the rest of eternity or something. Because I
Probably something
woke up
like
one day and said
that.
I was a woman.
That
Like,
sounds
what the
David
hell?
Parker-ish.
Yeah, but like he's a good orator. He's good at speaking and like commanding a crowd, and he's good at organizing. And that's something that people who think like me are really bad at. We like wagging our fingers at each other and getting all mad at each other. You're not caring about people in the right way. You're not speaking in the right way. You're not using the right words. And I think we need to be better at giving people grace and working together. Otherwise, freaks like David Parker will continue to organize, and they will get their ideas in place, and it will kill mass amounts of people just because he doesn't like them.
And this, thank you. You are a better speaker than you think you are. Because you articulated that very well. But I think it's really, really important to highlight that David Parker's whole thing is people need to show up. And I would make the argument, based on the results of this last municipal election, that, including the school boards, in many large areas of the province, certainly in Calgary, people did show up and went, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't need that kind of crazy on my school board. Thank you very much. And that is, to me, a proof point that people need to embrace and run with, because the strength that the crazy people have is they will talk to anyone, anytime, anywhere. I'm sure you've probably been. I was at Shoppers Drug Mart, and this guy was going on about how to the poor cashier, he was going on about how Alberta pays these transfer payments directly to Ottawa, and they just take all of our money, and we actually have a constitutional mechanism by which we can just stop paying all of our taxes, and I think Danny's gonna do it, and I'm just standing in line going like, don't. Because he's doomed. I'm not gonna reach him. But it's that energy that they bring where they'll talk to anyone, and they will ruin the Thanksgivings, and they will ruin the Christmases, and they will say, look, we got a problem here. This premier is looking at violating, before the courts even get a say, people's charter rights. And those are the same rights that are of the same consequence that are you getting arrested. So if you don't think that this is relevant to you, let me explain to you why. Also, there's this really great podcast you should listen to. Dr. Bratt.
Yes. Jay's lost, but it's only game 2. No one really cares.
There we go.
People care.
Okay, bring that energy to the politics. Dr. Bratt, one of the things that I appreciate most about the conversations that we have on the show is the willingness for you to show vulnerability. And I know that is not an easy thing to do. I know it's not an easy place to be. So I want to, before I go down the list, I didn't make you cry this time.
No.
I mean, I got 5 minutes, so let's see what we can do. But any final thought? I mean, I would love to do another hour on the recall piece, on the citizen referendum piece, and I know you have some strong feelings about that, so maybe we schedule a follow-up. Is there any final thoughts that you want people to hear on the things that we talked about tonight?
Just, the theme was the notwithstanding clause. Once you use it, it becomes so much easier to use again. And the other thing to be worried about is a lot of this is going to be popular. Forcing the teachers back to work is going to be popular. Parents may sympathize with teachers, and we've got lots of polling data to show that, but they also want their kids back in school. When they forced the port workers back, when they forced Air Canada flight attendants back, those were all popular. This will be popular. Punching down on small minorities like transgender people is going to be popular. The internment of the Japanese was popular when it happened. The War Measures Act of Pierre Trudeau was popular at the time. And then over time it goes, oh my God, if I had been there, we'd never have done that. And so that's kind of a problem, is you're not going to see the full effects until later on. And so we'll have to, I'm not optimistic about where we're going in this province.
I asked you this question. I think I've asked you this question the last 3 times that I've had you on the show. You know where I'm going. Is Alberta becoming more authoritarian?
Yes. Yeah, a good illustration is what I know you deal with the province. You don't deal with municipalities, but I'll tie this all in. We saw a repudiation of the party system in Calgary and Edmonton. People said before they even introduced parties, we don't want parties in municipalities. And Rick McIver said, Well, you're not gonna have it. We're only doing it in 2 jurisdictions. Yeah, the 2 largest jurisdictions. And it got repudiated. You've got the mayor-elect of both major cities ran against parties. Most of council ran against parties. Even those that were part of parties, like a Dan McLean, would have been elected as an incumbent anyway, right? And you still have public opinion opposed to this, and Dan Williams, the municipal affairs minister, former addiction minister, comes out and says, well, we're gonna do it again. We're gonna continue with this because it takes time for parties to grow a brand. Well, no, all these parties are gonna disappear, and we're gonna have different parties emerge for the next time, and it won't be a better Calgary, it'll be an even better Calgary,
Calgary, great,
A better,
Yeah,
better Calgary.
yeah, make Calgary great again, So I'm not seeing much learning going on here. There was problems, huge fiasco with the polling, the casting of votes, and of the counting of votes. What did we see? It's the municipality's fault. Well, if Calgary screws up, and Medicine Hat screws up, and Red Deer screws up, and Calgary screws up, either all of those people are wrong, or the people who made them do all of that is wrong. I'll let the voters figure that part out.
Dr. Hardcastle, anything you want to wrap up with?
No, I share the concern that once you use the notwithstanding clause, it'll be easier to use it, and it's not something that we had previously normalized. As a good democracy, we'd put faith into the different branches of government, and the courts having their role, which is to act as a check on the government, and so that for that reason, and some of the other reasons I've highlighted, like the turning away from experts, the not being receptive to feedback from citizens and groups that have stakes in particular issues. I'm also not that encouraged about where we are, and I think that because this is a recipe that worked for Smith in the last election, I think we're likely to see more of it. The sort of hate of Ottawa, and the we're going to put vaccine status as a ground of discrimination in the human rights legislation, and we're going to can AHS because we don't like what happened during COVID, and I just think we're going to get more of that, because it did seem to work for her to try to bring in some of those more right voters, and so it's what a great time to be alive in the province of Alberta.
A legal question.
Yeah.
I've heard power can be addictive. And I've heard that if someone demonstrates a pattern of disruptive or destructive behavior in their workplace, there may be options. I know a paramedic. What are my odds?
Well, I think you currently find yourself in a vulnerable legal position, and so continuing with your disclaimers is probably a prudent course of action at this point.
That was a joke.
Allegedly.
Mostly. Stephanie, final thoughts.
Okay, first of all, I have to say that rewind that part that I said about the CBE hires everyone. I retract that. I'm not saying anything about my employer. They are, I'll say there's a 70 million teacher shortage in this globe. Maybe 55 million of that are in developing areas, but 20 million of that is still within our major cities and in big countries like Canada, the United States. And so just really that comment about, well, we're gonna hire 1,000 more teachers a year for the next 3 years. No, you're going to endeavor that the school boards hire those teachers. I don't know where they're coming from when they can make more money in every other province. And so I just, so number one, I never said anything bad about the CBC.
I thought you said CBC.
Oh, CBC. And lastly, I just, the one, and it sucks that this is the consolation prize, but, as the ATA, one of the goals, the mandates is to get education on as one of the top 3 election conversations. So when polling goes out, what are the 3 things you're thinking about at this coming election? And education's like number 8. Well, like, we're number 1 right now. How do we see that in 2027? How do we maintain? We have to give ourselves a pat on the back that education is now a major issue, and our people know that class sizes are way too big and that the complexities are out of control and our teachers are getting hurt. That's not great, but like, it's not nothing.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that, like, in terms of like all of the policies and the positions the government's holding on like substance use and like mental health and homelessness, it just like there's no good arguments to be made for a lot of what they're like. Even like conservatives love to pride themselves on like, we're so like financially sound, like we're so good at doing an economy, and not really. And like especially with like these proposals is like we just got a letter like a couple weeks ago. I'm sure maybe you saw me on the news talking about it. The Safe Works is the provider, like the supervised consumption site is the provider for all other services for the like harm reduction gear we hand out. So like they get it, they have funding, and this is interesting with the breakup of AHS. The funding for the pipes that they hand out to all the agencies in the city is funding from a grant that is now overseen by Primary Care Alberta, but SafeWorks is under Recovery Alberta. So then you have the ministry, then you have both of these new ministries, and everybody involved in all of them can just be like, well, they're the ones
it's that guy.
they're the ones funding the pipes, and then they can be like, oh well, we gave them the funding to spend on however that organization sees fit to spend the money. So if they ran out of pipes in November when they were supposed to have funding to cover this until later into next year, well, that's their fault, and they can all just point fingers instead of being like anybody taking any sort of responsibility or accountability. And like any of the like evidence or like I don't know, if you don't want to have compassion for people that use drugs or people that live on the street because you just see them as like that's some sort of moral failing, they made a choice to be there or whatever, think that way. I don't care. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of trying to convince people that human beings are human beings. But like I say, the economics of it all, like, why would you cut funding to me handing out pipes when me handing out a pipe that costs less than $1 per piece, like the downstream medical costs, like they're less strain on emergency rooms and stuff. This pipe that costs less than $1, that's substantially cheaper than treating somebody's HIV or hepatitis for the rest of their life, because that's something that is I mean, at least for now, we'll see with the notwithstanding clause, but that sort of thing is a chartered right in Canada, that sort of healthcare. Like that's in the like tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a lifetime. But I could give that person like a pipe that's like, I don't know, 50, 60, 90 cents. and like we could figure out supporting them to find recovery later if that's what they want. But like, hell, I kept that person alive, and I kept them from getting HIV and causing more of a strain on the healthcare system and more of a strain on communities.
Yeah.
What's the argument for the way, and like also the whole idea of like we either have to do this Alberta model of recovery focused, or you do the dirty evil harm reduction. It's like it's not an either or, man. Like I want people to do well, and I want them to find recovery if that's what they want, and I will support them every step of the way. We have people that we've worked with on like in the community that like found recovery, and like there's people that like lived on the street 2 years ago that are friends of mine that are like firefighters and shit in this province now. You can't tell me that what we're doing doesn't work.
I know it does.
Like,
Yeah, no, I
but
would,
then what we've talked about, like they don't want to listen to experts, and like they'd look at me and be like, that's some purple-haired transsexual, like we can't listen to her, like they don't want to listen to experts, and then in like some fields, like you're gonna get an angry woman like me yelling at you, and so like you're not gonna listen to me anyways, even if you are listening to the other experts.
yeah.
And it's like it's such an easy community to punch down on, and to like you said with the top surgery for minors, it's 8 kids. Like we're talking about violating chartered rights because 8 kids got a surgery in 24 months. 8 of them. Like we make up like 1% of the total population. And like drug users aren't a big community either. And drug users are seen as like dirty failures, like moral failing, all these horrible things that people like to think. And so we're really easy communities to marginal, like, because this government sucks. They suck. They're doing bad things. And they're doing bad things with the knowledge that they are doing bad things. And so they need to distract. It's like Dr. Bratt said, these are popular things that they're doing, right? Because you build all this fear of the transgender agenda, and like it's you gotta protect the kids. Like that's like that authoritarians have done that tale as old as time. You say that the weird freaks are a threat to the kids, and all of a sudden you have half of the population supporting you no matter what you want to do. Like,
Yeah.
So it's helping them to just like, what the hell's going on with AHS? What is this healthcare thing?
Don't ask
What
me.
is going on with education? Like they're trying to dismantle these services, these institutions, so they can privatize them, so their friends that run the private versions of these things can make money on them. And nobody really wants that. Like even the most conservative voters, if you like explain it to them in a way that they can understand, they don't even want that. So if you get everybody screaming at each other about trans children and giving crack pipes to homeless people, then they don't have the energy or the focus to talk about what's really going on.
I can't even remember, anecdotally, and worth absolutely nothing probably, I can't even remember the last time I treated anyone who had a crack overdose. Like that's just not a thing anymore.
No.
So, I want to thank all of my guests tonight. Dr. Bratt. If the small is too small, let me know.
Okay, thank you.
If you ever get invited to another throne speech,
It's very good.
You'll be
Something to
kicked
wear.
out.
I would pay real money for a picture.
I'll talk to you.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to chat today. In a shocking twist for anybody who's ever been interviewed by me, we've gone long. And so we were going to try to do a Q&A. We don't really have time because they're going to start charging me a lot of money. You guys can go. I want to bring Alicia up for like 2 minutes, and then we'll let you guys go. Perfect, yeah. So I know Dr. Bratt has some strong thoughts on referendum and public things, and I'm gonna bug him for another episode on that, because there's a nuanced conversation to be had there for sure. Darn it, I thought I had a free phone. But in the context of citizen-initiated things and stuffs, we just did an episode with this young lady over here, where we talked about have a seat. Where we talked about the, what is it again?
Citizen-initiated petition?
Yeah, that's what it is. Citizen-initiated petition. And the question, I'm going to paraphrase and then you can tell me how wrong I got it. The question is, do you believe that all public dollars should be going towards public schools for education and not private schools?
Yeah.
I got the gist of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm super thrilled that we were able to make space for Alicia and Co. Because you brought quite the little posse there. And I would encourage everybody to consider, I'm not going to make you do it because I can't, but I would encourage everybody to consider, if you didn't get it on the way in, on the way out, if that's something that you believe the public dollars should only go towards public education, then grab a signature, and I'm going to let you explain why this is a thing while you hand me that.
Yes, sir. There you go. So the reason that I initiated this petition was because private school students in this province are paid, are covered 70% as much as public school students to attend private institutions. And at the same time, our public school students are not being funded nearly enough. And that's a concern to me and many of the people in this room. I talked to lots of people coming in who signed up to support this petition as canvassers, and lots of people who were excited to sign it. And so it's an important issue, and I'm really excited to have brought this forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And this is the other thing. Like, I talked about David Parker's right, and I hate it. But the big piece that's missing in so many of the conversations is the will to actually do the things. And this is the kind of thing, this is under new rules too, so you don't even have to do like the Lacasic work. This is the kind of thing where you can send a powerful message to government for the direction that you want to see this province go to. And so people were, I know that with the Forever Canadian one, people were bringing their petitions to work and bugging people in the lunchroom, and maybe don't do that depending on your job, but there's Thanksgiving, the Halloween. The kids coming to the door will be too young. But their parents, there's lots of opportunities in getting engaged in doing these things. They've got a head start, the crazy people. And the only thing that is going to work to push them back is the effort of pushing them back. So if you have the time and you have the inclination, I would strongly encourage you to talk to Alicia about becoming a canvasser and helping to send a very strong message to the government that their priorities of emulating the American system, perhaps. I took some legal advice there, I did. And doing what the Americans do, which doesn't happen in Alberta, of funneling money to their friends, which doesn't happen in Alberta. Make sure that doesn't happen or continue here. So, yeah, Alicia, thank you so much. The reason why we've got the pumpkin, the reason why I opened with the cartoon is because if you sit and you do nothing, that's the outcome. So doing something, getting other people to do something is critically important because David Parker doesn't, to my knowledge, have a day job. He's got nothing but time. And he's going to keep David Parkering. And so if there isn't an equivalent meeting of force to rise up to that, we're going to have the notwithstanding clause being used on way too many things that it shouldn't be. With that being said, if you like the hoodies, we do have our merch store. There was somebody who asked, are we going to have merch here? No. That's a lot of work, and I do have a day job. So if you want to get some merch, you can do that at www.thebreakdownabmerch.ca. And it's good quality stuff, I don't mind saying. I quite like it, and we don't really make I think I make $1, because I just think it's super cool that people want to buy stuff. So it's not very expensive at all either. And the Patreon plug. If you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we would love nothing more than if you sought to sign up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. You can set your own price, and it really does help us in doing all of the things, all of the FOIPs, all of the getting sued. There's the last plug of the night. There's my home screen. There's my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you all so much for coming out. And in the name of all things good and holy, keep the conversation going.